Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Emirates Shipping Association discussion. Our topic for today is the marine insurance, war risk, and operation resilience during geopolitical maritime disruptions. The maritime industry has once again found itself navigating an increasingly complex geopolitical environment. Recent tensions have highlighted the importance of understanding how insurance, ship owners, charters, lenders, and regulators would respond in event of prolonged disruptions to major strategic waterways. Today, we are privileged to be joined by experts from the Norwegian Hull Club to help us better understand the insurance implications of such scenarios, including war risk coverage, claims handling, crew welfare, underwriting perspectives, market capacity, and lessons from previous maritime crises. Joining us today are Matthew Pridding, Underwriter, Snorre Halvorsen, Executive Senior Advisors, Loss Prevention and Emergency Response, and Joseph Shead, Legal Advisor at the Norwegian Hull Club. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. I'll hand over to you to take us through the presentation, and then we can move on to the main discussion Q&A session. Over to you.
Great, thanks, Ali. We just thought we'd use the opportunity to tell your members a bit about ourselves and a bit about war insurance. So here we go. So we're Norwegian Hull Club. We're a mutual hull insurer, probably the only one in the world, and we support clients kind of across the world. But we're in the London office where I work, we have a special focus on the Middle East. So across the club, we lead sort of 60% of the business that we do, and we handle a lot of claims at the same time as well. We have a daughter company called Marine Benefits who offer crew insurance for crew when they're ashore, as well as their families, and they're kind of recognised as a global leader in that market. We have another daughter company called Instech, who are a dedicated marine insurance software company, and they're currently building a bespoke marine cloud-based system, which should make our lives and their clients' lives a lot easier in the marine insurance world. And then lastly, we have Njord, who are sort of market leaders in the renewable space. And as you can see here, they insure over 6,000 active turbines in quite a new and evolving industry. So it's exciting what's going on there. Moving on to just a sort of quick recap on how we've got to where we are today to be lucky enough to be giving this podcast. So on the 28th of February, the US and Israel attacked Iran, and it has quickly escalated to the point where Iran have announced the Straits of Hormuz closed, and the US have also announced the blockade of it. At the time of sort of the blockade, there was approximately 3 billion of assets exposed in the region, which is not a insignificant number, I think we can say. And covering these vessels would be their war insurers. And just to give a very kind of quick introduction to war insurance, it essentially covers the vessels for war perils that would be excluded under their marine hull policy. So things like mines, torpedoes, rockets, missiles would be excluded from your hull, and then you buy a separate policy to cover yourself for those. It's structured in that you buy an annual policy from your underwriter, and that covers you worldwide apart from excluded areas, which you can see on this map here. So if you're sailing in the darker areas and you're hit by a missile, your annual policy will cover you. But if you want to sail into one of the lighter blue areas, or maybe one of the ports in one of the countries in red, you then need to buy the insurance back from your underwriter to cover you for the set number of days agreed with your underwriter when you're in those areas. That's a very brief explanation, and then Joe will tell you a bit more about it.
Thanks, Matt. So I think the focus in the past few months has obviously been regarding the supposed closure of the straits, or the restriction of marine traffic through that quite narrow waterway. I mean, in fact, it's probably not the first instance where geopolitics have affected maritime trade in the recent years. The Ukraine-Russia conflict also resulted in closure of certain ports and certain waterways, and there were similar considerations that we had to have then. So what are the primary things that you would look to be covering from your war insurers in these type of situations? Well, I think the first and foremost is a vessel or vessels becoming stuck in a particular waterway so that they're actually of no use to you as an owner. So deprivation of possession. And what that can mean, that after a certain period, effectively you've lost that ship. You've lost free use and disposal of that ship for long enough to trigger a claim under your policy. And we can touch upon that a bit further down, how that works. Another quite sort of obvious one when you're thinking about war insurance is the vessel itself being attacked physically. And that can come in many forms, as we've seen over the years, whether it be drones, mines, rockets, boarding in some way. So those are very real risks. Those tend to happen to individual vessels or a number of vessels over a period, where obviously deprivation of possession, as Matt's map and the potential exposure showed, that would tend to affect numerous, tens or hundreds of vessels, whoever happens to be in the waterway at the time that that it's closed. So it's a much wider spread threat, but equally the risk to life, to property and so on is very real in terms of being physically attacked. Then we have seizure by foreign states. Now, whilst that's heightened in the current situation within the Arabian Gulf, and also we see that in various other conflict areas around the world, that's a threat that exists continuously. Seizure by foreign states. There are places in the world where the risk of operating is much higher. The judicial or legal system is much less certain, and vessels can be seized for various reasons, some of which will be covered under the war risk policy if it's not possible to get your vessel back. Now, in commercial shipping, what all of these things boil down to is a financial loss, effectively. And that might be because you cannot leave and therefore continue to ply your trade. It might be as a charterer, you're continuing to pay hire, but cannot use the vessel to deliver and cargo and so on and receive freight. But that is also an insurable interest if you happen to lose your earnings whilst you're stuck or seized or attacked and under repair and so on. Another risk here, which is again continuous and widespread, is the kind of cyber risk and risk of spoofing and navigational issues that may arise if your GPS systems are attacked, altered, tampered with, which can happen remotely and again can affect a number of ships. Next slide, Matt. Okay. And I think when we're discussing these issues in areas which are undergoing kind of geopolitical tensions, the focus, and perhaps rightly, is always on the war insurance. But the war insurance is not the only insurance that may be required to respond in these situations. Whilst the background, the context of where a vessel may be might be one of war or a war peril, the usual maritime risks continue to be in play. So it may be ships colliding with each other, or machinery breakdowns whilst you're stuck within the Gulf. And actually those risks can become more enhanced as a result of the location of a vessel. So, as we might see in the Gulf at the moment, we have reduced repair options and facilities. They're a bit more stretched. You don't have the options to go to ports on the other side of the strait. Maintenance may become an issue because it's not as simple to do port calls or get parts. One issue which we are quite aware of is that the crew become stressed and strained and tired and fatigued. Even post COVID, as Snorre mentioned, we do surveys of 70,000 plus crew members. This was already an issue of crew becoming fatigued, tired, overworked, or feeling stressed. So being in a conflict area is only going to heighten those type of things, and those can lead to accidents. Accidents happening. And the last one is as I mentioned before, the kind of spoofing cyber attacks, which, depending on the circumstances, might fall into a marine category or a war category. So whilst you will be looking to your war insurers for support, your marine insurers will also be very conscious of the situation which you find yourselves as ship owners stuck, and their risk profile effectively has changed. So next slide now. And so the first point I kind of touched upon is this concern over what we would refer to as a blocking and trapping situation, and that means that a ship is stuck in a limited geographical area, and for the purposes of certainly some insurances, war insurances, the Arabian Gulf isn't a sufficiently limited area, and they're stuck so they can't go out. It's very difficult to assess whether vessels are truly prevented from leaving, or it is a heightened risk but it's still possible to leave, or the different risk appetites that different owners may have. And I think that situation is possibly made more difficult in modern times, where a lot of this plays out over kind of social media and conflicting news changes on a daily basis. With regards to kind of the previous conflict I referred to in Ukraine and Russia, it was a much more stable situation in the sense that other than grain corridors occasionally opening up and so on, there was no doubt that what the situation was. I think as we've seen over the last few months, the situation within the Gulf is quite different in terms of how it's reported and how news reports it, and that makes trying to ascertain the facts quite difficult. And I think in that respect, close communication between our members, the insurers, the brokers is very important, to understand where what the thinking is of all the different parties involved, and how they view the situation, and sharing, back to Snorre's point, sharing situational awareness and intel where it's possible to share intel, because as we've discovered, having a vast network of members, and with that comes a lot of different information that's useful and to patch together that we can share. So so that's the kind of main risk at the moment, or one of the main risks that we've been focusing on. But behind all of this, I think it's sometimes easy to forget that there's people. There's humans behind this, and I think that's at the forefront of our minds when dealing with any casualty or potential casualty, is that all of these vessels have crew on board, and whilst the asset may be worth millions or tens of millions, ultimately the human element has to come first. And where war insurance is often very different is that it includes an element of P&I cover. So that will factor in a bit of the crew care, whereas hull and machinery insurers generally will leave the P&I insurance to P&I clubs. When it comes to a war insurance, there will be an element of P&I within there. And that means that many insurers aren't used to dealing with P&I that are suddenly thrown into a situation, maybe following an attack, or if a near miss on a ship and the crew are understandably frightened and so on, how to deal with that. And I think that requires a very different set of skills and contacts than perhaps dealing with a normal hull and machinery claim. So often the things we see is crew requiring immediate repatriation from difficult areas. Following a potential attack, crew are traumatized, and it maybe not be come out in physical injuries, but psychologically traumatized. How best to support those, and we have lots of tools at our disposal to try and provide as much support as possible. And what we've also found is by doing that, by supporting a crew in these difficult times, actually the outcome for the assets improves because the crew want to help and so on. So it's humans first, but actually it plays an important part of the overall matrix of a claim. So Matt, I think that's
it for the presentation.
Thank you very much. It's a very informative presentation. So before we dive into the technical aspects, I mean, I'd like to start with a broad question here. So over the past few years, we've witnessed a series of major maritime disruptions. I mean, from COVID to port congestions to the Red Sea crisis and some other geopolitical tensions. So from your perspective, how prepared is today's maritime insurance market for a prolonged closure of a strategic maritime checkpoint?
I think we're pretty well prepared. I think it's been shown over the past few years with the situations that you have mentioned, say COVID or the Red Sea. COVID was kind of a shock to everyone, I think, and definitely a new world and a new way of working. And I think insurers were quick to kind of set up their teams at home, fully functional laptops, cameras, printers, whatever was needed.
Yeah.
Even going further to getting remote surveys done on the vessels because the surveyors couldn't travel. Waiving the class inspections until it could be kind of safely done. I think we're a forward-thinking market, and obviously you don't know these things are around the corner, and when they come, you have to react to them. I think with the Russia-Ukraine, insurers on the whole were quick to pay the total losses after the year, supporting their owners in that way. I think with COVID as well, Joe might be able to tell us more, but there were not many claims during COVID because the vessels were continuing to trade, and which meant insurers were kind of putting money in their pockets to then be able to react once COVID stopped, and then the claims started coming through. I think it's about sort of long-term thinking and not just thinking, our ratios are looking good at the moment.
I think with some of these situations that we've referred to where vessels are maybe forced to become idle or trade in a slightly different way, the risks don't necessarily present themselves immediately.
Yeah.
And it may be a longer tail where actually we might see that owing to situations beyond anybody's control, the maintenance regime has not been as rigorously followed, or the machinery has been used in a different way and is not meant to be idle for that long, and so on. And I think the market's prepared for that. The cover, if you have good cover in place, it will be able to deal with these particular issues. What we find now, even following COVID, is supply chains have changed dramatically. You can't get parts as readily as you want to in the case of a machinery damage, or for example, and And I think that might have been a driver for people maybe reflecting on how a casualty might reflect their balance books and taking out, loss of hire insurance to protect the underlying balance sheet in a different way. So the market's there for it. The capacity is there to support what owners want to do, and but that depends on risk appetites and so on. So I think, in the current situation, we've seen rates driven quite high for certain types of vessels because the trade has changed, and we as a market, and we particularly as a loss of hire insurer, we've been supportive of that. We're there to insure what people want to insure, and our job is to get the capacity to provide the product. And I think we've reacted well. And it's then working with the ship owners to understand how they want to manage that risk.
Yeah, and I think the insurance market was sort of unfairly portrayed at the start of the conflict. In there was lots of talk of cover being pulled and cancelled and that sort of thing. Which the cover was cancelled, but then reinstated immediately, sort of according to the clauses representing the new risk. So it wasn't like insurers were pulling the drawbridge up and saying we're running away. It's it's kind of an agreed contract and an agreed clauses, and then you reassess the new risk and continue to support your clients.
No, of course, it's a contractual obligation for both parties. But if we go a bit specific, given that the UAE ports and associated marine services remained fully operations throughout the recent period of regional tensions, how do insurance and underwriters differentiate between regional geopolitical risks and the demonstrated operational resilience of specific maritime hubs when assessing trade conditions or underwriting decisions, and maybe the restoration of the market confidence for that matter?
Risks are kind of assessed on an individual basis, and what we want to see is that there is the kind of the right support in the region that our vessels are trading to. Obviously, like a place in the Gulf where there are yards and there are salvors and there is kind of all the surrounding support that will help us in an emergency. From an underwriting perspective, you feel a bit safer there than if they were somewhere completely remote where we had no help to call on. It's a risk by risk kind of thing. I'm trying to think of a better word for it.
I think it's perhaps worth mentioning that we've our aim is to support our clients, and that's not for us. It's not a short-term engagement. So if the situation and our client situation changes, we're not in a position that we would ever want to walk away from that, despite the risk profile changing. What would we try and understand, and this is a part of the thing of getting to know your client before something bad happens, before a conflict breaks out, before it's tested. Understand the operation, understand the trades, and assess that risk on that basis. I think vessels, and we can only really view it from the point of view of vessels rather than perhaps port infrastructure and so on, but vessels that trade within the Gulf generally and don't tend to leave and trade within that maritime hub, that risk profile is very different from vessels that would like to transit frequently. It's not to say that the risk hasn't heightened, because we all know it has. That's a reality on the ground, but it's not the same risk. So we would want to support that. Trade has to go on, and a necessary part of that is vessels want to feel insured and so on. So I think, as Matt said, individual basis, and hopefully people's brokers will come in and give Matt as an underwriter a difficult time and say, well, actually, this is different because and these are the reasons. This is the infrastructure it's using, which is unaffected or resilient.
We have had examples, Ali, of course, vessels being able to do maintenance, do crew change, and of course the operational resilience in the hubs in the Emirates or other places are actually the risk is lower than the strategic picture of things. So it's not a geographical kind of risk. It's the risk assessments are locally on the different hubs and the yards and whatever. So it's by case. I think you have to
Yeah.
be in an operational mind. It's a lower risk, but the strategic risk is always there, as the situation is now. So it's kind of a different from the geographical point of view to the
Yeah.
local resilient hubs.
Yeah.
So you Joseph mentioned something about knowing your client at an earlier stage. So when a large scale regional disruption develops, what are the primary concerns underwriters focus on first? And what information insurers seek from operators and ship owners during that early stage of knowing each other, or even if a crisis kind of develops? I mean, what would be the information required at an early stage?
So I think what I would pass over to Snorre here, perhaps in the first instance, because I think when these things happen, the very first thing we want to do is understand the situation as much as possible, and this is perhaps where Snorre's role
Well,
comes in.
yeah, and as
Right.
I started this podcast, you have to trust your information sources, and to rely on reliable information is about having partners where you are sure of getting the right information. So having situational awareness on the correct picture is one thing, and of course when we don't ask the question, is the vessel insured? We ask what is actually happening. And we like to have different, of course, facts from the ship owners to make sure that we have the correct picture on the situational status on the vessel. So it's about having the status of crew, the status of cargo, the status of the vessel position, and all these kind of details that we need to build a correct picture is what we like to ask in the beginning. If something happens, we will respond accordingly to what information we have got, and we will also search for information if it's not if it's not possible to communicate directly with the master on board and such. So we have used all kinds of means to get this situational awareness to make sure we have the right picture to take the right decisions or the right advice, because we are the advisors for the ship owners. We are not
Of
doing
course.
decisions. That's for the ship owners to actually
Yeah.
take the correct decisions.
Yeah.
Let's
So sorry.
no. Go ahead, Ali.
Yeah, so I was just summarizing that the better your information, the better your insurer can support you,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Right.
that's the short version of that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think
So
just one brief thing to mention in that respect is when we're saying about getting to know each other earlier, even just
yeah,
understanding an organisation's structure, how are decisions made, who is making them, what's the chain between the ship and the ultimate, and understanding that rather than trying to figure it out once something's happened is quite
of
an
course,
important
yes.
thing, and we help with that. But for us to understand it, it's also important.
Yes. Yeah. So let's just move to another point. So if if tensions were to continue for several months rather than just several weeks, how would you expect the insurance market to respond? And in specific words, how might premiums, deductible, trading warranties, policy conditions, or even available capacity evolve?
I I think it will just continue business as usual, and it will react to kind of the fluctuations in the risk presented. So I don't know. For the last 2 weeks, we thought the situation was calming down a bit, and then the premiums came down with it. But since Monday, when it seems to have heightened a bit more, then the fluctuations will sort of increase. Um, Trying to think if we look at maybe the whole market or the loss of hire market going forward. If there's lots of vessels kind of in almost hot layup in the Arabian Gulf, we'd like to think that the owners are maintaining their vessels well and keeping them running to a high standard. But if they're not, we might see more claims on those vessels, more machinery claims, and then the kind of premium and deductible will reflect that and will be assessed on a case by case basis. Um, yeah, I think you just you trust your clients and your members to kind of act as a prudent uninsured, and that they'll continue to keep running their vessels to the highest standard. I think if it goes on for 12 months, then yeah, underwriters will start becoming a bit more worried about their exposure, maybe. And then if there's, well, I don't think there's still 6 billion worth of assets in there, but if there's a lot in there, then we could see quite a major change. But then there's the reinsurance market in there as well, who will take some. So
Yeah, so
Sorry.
insurance will always remain available, but obviously there will be different prices, different terms as per the circumstances.
absolutely, yeah. It's not one size fits all. It's assess
Yeah.
the individual risk and give a fair price to what's presented to you. Yeah, there's a number of different kind of considerations we take. I don't think we can do it on you can't micromanage to you. There
Yeah.
has to be the trust, and there is the trust there. Yeah, we'll business will keep going on, and we'll continue to support our clients.
Yeah.
And so one
Sorry.
area where you may see conditions change slightly is the risks attaching to being trapped if you're to go in. So not necessarily the physical damage if you're hit by something or struck, but
Right.
knowingly going into an area where it's going to prove very, very difficult maybe to get back out again. The cover may vary in terms of what's available to you if you do become stuck, in terms of, say, loss of earning cover or so on. There may be tighter conditions around that because it's a much more of a known risk than it was, say 8 weeks ago. So that's an area where perhaps you could see a tightening, instead of relaxing if the situation changes.
Yeah, that leads me to the next question, which is basically if vessels became immobilized for an extended periods, whether it's 30 days or 60 or even 90 days, or even sometimes longer, when do underwriters begin considering constructive total loss implications?
So I think going back some years, policies would have possibly had either 6 months or 12 months sort of built into their policy as a trigger point. I think over the last few years, you will not see many policies that include a 6-month detention clause. So generally, it will be a 12 months will be a trigger for a total loss, and that has to be a continuous period of 12 months during which you cannot. There's an active war peril of restraint, or you cannot leave. You physically can't leave. And that's when I think underwriters will start considering constructive total losses. I think one always has to look at their jurisdiction and their policy clauses in case there's any special clauses within there. But as a market standard, I would expect 12 months to be the point at which underwriters, as Matt said, start looking very closely at those total losses and what the exposures might be. In terms of clauses within policies, most war covers will include some form of blocking and trapping clause, and they vary, and it will depend on the conditions that are in play, whether it's Nordic plan, English conditions, American hull form. All of these conditions will have some form of restraint or blocking and trapping clause that will need to be looked at closely.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if you could get under 12 months. I've heard of quotes recently of underwriters quoting for vessels going into the Arabian Gulf of 18 months. So yeah, people are definitely starting to look at that a bit.
Yeah, so it's very important for ship owners to read the policy wording very well and read it now to understand your policy and the wording associated with it.
Yeah.
But also, I will add just from loss prevention point of view, it's when you are immobilized like that for how many now weeks they have been there, crew fatigue. You have also now urging corrosion issues because of the cargo they have not been able to get rid of. So it's a kind of a emerging risk as well in this picture. Not only the war risk as such, but also other risks. That is because of the endurance of the situation. So I think being aware of these kind of things also is.
It's very important, of course. Yes. So we're just moving on for the sake of time. There is always one issue that creates confusion in the distinction between war risk and political risk coverage. When does that distinction become practically important? And do current insurance wordings adequately address the relationship or the reality of the modern geopolitical disruptions?
I suspect this one's probably coming my way. The reality on a war hull and machinery or a warship policy is that I think calling it a war policy is a slight misnomer. It covers political risks. War in itself is a political risk, right? It always has a political background to it, and many of the perils that you will find in them are not only war but social and political risks. So it might be strikes, terrorism, civil unrest. All these things are covered within the war peril. So there's a slight blurring of what we might consider I think in land-based policies there's much more of a differentiation between what one might consider a political risk and a war risk. That's not the case within marine policy so much. And in terms of do the current insurance wordings address the realities, I think they do. I mean, a lot of these wordings go back 150, 200 years. I mean, when I talk about ships being seized or restraint as the closure might be considered, this is restraint of kings and princes, it's known. It goes back 250 years perhaps to the kind of Spanish Civil War and beyond. So or Spanish privateers, sorry. So but it hasn't needed updating necessarily. I think having an understanding and trying to understand your policy before things happen and speaking, whether to your insurers or broker is an important thing to do. And we're, a lot of my time is spent speaking to our members about what their clauses actually mean. And that's important, but they are fluid enough that they can react to almost any situation. But there are boundaries. It's understanding what the boundaries of the cover are. I think is the most important thing.
I think 4 months ago, quite a lot of underwriters weren't thinking that we'd have to use the 5 main powers cancellation clause that has been in the policies for a number of years, but they were in there and they've come into force. So yeah, it's how do you plan for the next the next thing?
And I think,
again, it's the focus on the wording of the policy, which is basically the most critical point here. So we're moving to one very close topic to my heart. Often the focus is on vessels and cargoes, but as you mentioned earlier, I mean, the human dimension is equally critical. So what obligation do ship owners have regarding crew welfare, repatriation, medical support, employer liability, when vessels are trapped or delayed, or maybe when operations at high risk? or high-risk areas?
I mean, I think you have to look at your agreements with your. First of all, I would say simply being trapped doesn't necessarily trigger cover under any insurance, but it will fall. As a ship owner, you will have obligations towards your crew, which are within the contract. We did see during COVID, in particular, long periods where crew couldn't be changed, and actually that has a real detrimental effect on the crew as well. And Snorre may touch upon this as well, but we're also living in an age where crew retention is becoming much more difficult and more important for good management of ships. So treating your crew well during difficult situations, I would say, goes a long way in terms of crew loyalty, keeping them, which in turn translates into good ship management, good ship running. So, but Snorre may have more on that.
Well, I think having a happy ship is not by being smiling all the time. It's having a leadership on board. It's having a team that is functioning over time. And it's of course we have had seafarers now being stuck on board since the beginning or before the beginning of this war, this conflict. So it's about addressing these kind of risk factors that crew has. In addition to the previous what we can call kind of a standard now, as we mentioned this survey called Refresh. From that survey, it was at the time 48% of the seafarers they answered that they couldn't or they didn't have anyone to talk to on board. And of course, when you don't have anyone to talk to, from my previous background, being an officer in the armed forces, it's about leadership. It's about having a team that is functioning, even though it's constrained. It's you have a situation where you are more stressed than ever because you have missiles and drones going after you or over you. So it's about making sure that you are prepared for treating the crew. I know that ship owners have been able to change crew during the time they have been trapped, but it's not everyone. And of course, having these plans ahead of going into these areas, the conflict areas, is about being prepared, and it's preparedness from A to Z. So it's about getting the right people, making sure that the officers on board are actually taking care of these people and they are trained and have skills and competence enough to actually feel and have this empathy over their seafarers. Yeah. I think that's a very crucial point.
Well, of course, it's a very important element that we have to focus on. Now, we're running out of time, but I think I'm just going to run this last question for you guys to address. I mean, it seems like everybody is focusing on the closure risk and we are underestimating the reopening risk. So if we assume that the disruption ends suddenly and traffic resumes as normal, and if numerous vessels attempt to transit simultaneously, what claim concentration risks emerge? Are there elevated exposure relating to collisions or cargo claims or salvage operations, or even pollution incidents for that matter?
As an underwriter, I very much hope it's done in a orderly and safe and kind of coordinated manner. Hundreds of. I know the Straits were 4 months ago used to a lot of vessels transiting when we had the corridors, but now it's a much different scenario with kind of mines in the area and a lot of vessels hoping to get out. So. Yeah, the risk of collisions and pollution. It's.
I think Matt, also the commercial pressure now when this is opening, you will have seafarers that are tired, they are fatigued. You have kind of a stampede that has been used as a word, going out or in from the same spot. So it's about the pressure that is coming, the schedule, and the regime that is now, let's hope it's coming back, a regime where you are actually able to go in and out, and how this regime will actually influence on the in the opening here is also to be timely, as you say, Matt, that you don't get any concentration risk in that area at such a.
I think it goes back to you trust your ship owning clients, don't you? That their safety is paramount, and they won't be doing anything to kind of affect that. But the potential for it to happen is certainly there. We just hope that it all goes out smoothly.
I think the opening is a risk itself, and doing a risk assessment on actually going out or in when it's open is actually something I would advise to do.
Absolutely. I think recovery has its own risks, and it has to be addressed in the same manner, I would say.
I will hand you over to Snorre to tell you a bit more about our service concept.
Yeah, thank you. So, Ali, Norwegian Hull Club, as an insurance company, we are quite unique when it comes to the service concept. We, as you see in the slide, we have more than 300 activities annually with our clients on different aspects on loss prevention. We have quite a big database now and experience, and one of our core values, of course, is to share. So we like to share our experience in what to do and what not to do with the loss prevention in mind. So we do this job together with our brokers and, of course, in close contact with also our clients. And we have also this loss prevention committee biannual where we gather about 30, 40 of our members to share their experience with a safe environment so we can actually learn from each other as well. So that's our mantra, to share knowledge, and it's our core value as well. The next slide, please, Matt. So being the leader for 60% of our fleet, as we like to call the vessels we insure, we are set up for that. Compared to other insurance companies, as you are in London maybe, we are a claims department of 47 people, divided into different areas and market areas. And my team is the loss prevention and emergency response team, supporting all the areas together with technical teams and the adjusting team, where Joe is part of. And of course, this is making us also robust for leading claims, and being a leader is also to be the responsible part for handling the claim when they come. And having approximately 3,000 claims annually, it gives us some kind of an experience which we like to share with others. Next slide, please. So the service concept is about this sharing. It starts with all the emerging risks that we study. We like to call ourselves kind of a sound paranoia team, where we look at the different types of risks around the world. We study cases. We also, via our subsidiary and Marine Benefits, we use the feedback from seafarers with this study called Refresh. 70,000 seafarers have been questioned before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now also after the pandemic on the crew well-being. And this is also something that is the topic we like to share. If you click one more, Matt. This is the concept as such. It's kind of a timeline where we start with risk awareness, where we sit with the client to make sure they are aware of the emerging risks, and also risks when they have kind of special voyage, or it's maybe a new build that is supposed to be going from example China to Europe, we can sit down with the client and do this voyage risk assessment as well. And we do this together as an aligned team with the technical team here in Norwegian Hull Club as well. Most of our concept is also the emergency preparedness thing, where we sit with the client with all levels in the client. It's the seafarers, the officers, with officers conferences. We do training also for the operational level, and we do training for the strategic level, the owner side of the shipping companies, where we do go into the emergency response kind of service concept, training in the different topics of crisis management. Next of kin handling, media training, of course, leadership in crisis for the persons that are actually in the emergency team lead role. We end up with a live exercise, and then we like to use our own staff for simulating different stakeholders, where we can play out a scenario together with the client and stress the emergency response organization to make them feel how robust their system and their skills are in decision making, having a safe environment in an exercise. We are using 20, 30 of our own staff to simulate media, simulate next of kin calling in, and all the other local authorities and other core stakeholders to make sure that they are feeling the reality of a crisis within the exercise. Of course, we have duty officers, so the emergency response support is our two duty officers on call 24/7, and we are also relying on our strategic partners, especially in security matters. And now, of course, in the Arabian Gulf, we see extensive use of our security partners to make sure that we have the situational awareness as necessary. And then it's the last part, it's the claim support. And of course, with the claims handlers, we can do ahead of a claim to make sure they are well known on the process to actually handle a claim efficiently. So we go into the client and teach them and train them in how to actually raise a claim and what the process actually are. So that's the service concept. Preparedness by awareness is our slogan in that concept. And of course, we take pride in being quite unique in this concept. Thank you.
Thanks, Snorre. So moving on, you can see these are the lines of business that we write, and as you can see, we're very kind of monoline and focused on these particular hull products, where we're, as Snorre said, we want to use our service concept to be the best leader in the market, and I think we're doing very well at that. We're lucky enough to work with a number of your members, which I think shows the class of ship owner that we deal with, and yeah, very happy to hopefully meet some more in the future. Here's just some figures for you. So as you can see, last year we insured just under 300 vessels from around 25 fleets in the Middle East, and we assisted them with just under 30 claims in that year. So all took sort of good cooperation to get the vessels back on the water, and hopefully everyone was happy with it. As I said, we have the focus on the Middle East in our office, and we try and travel out regularly and meet our clients and brokers face to face, and really try and support the region as much as we can.
If I was to summarize the entire discussion in few sentences, I'd probably say the biggest lesson for ship owners is that resilience is built before a crisis, not during one. And insurance remain a critical pillar of resilience. But preparation, transparency, communication, crew welfare, and proactive stakeholder engagement ultimately determine how successfully companies navigate major geopolitical disruptions. Gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today.
Thank
This
you.
discussion has highlighted not only the complexity of maritime insurance in a volatile geopolitical environment, but also the importance of preparation, transparency, strong stakeholder engagement, and operational resilience. On behalf of the Emirates Shipping Association, I'd like to thank Matthew Pridding, Snorre Halvorsen, and Joseph Shead for joining us and contributing their valuable perspectives. We look forward to continuing these important conversations as the industry navigates an insightful and increasing dynamic risk landscape. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.